Opportunism, and the Collapse of the Second Internationale by Vladimir Lenin, written at the end of 1915. It is instructive to compare the attitudes of the various classes and parties towards the collapse of the Internationale, which has been revealed by the 1914–15 war. On one hand, the bourgeoisie extols to the sky those socialists who have expressed themselves in favor of defending the fatherland, that is, in favor of the war and evading the bourgeoisie. On the other hand, the bourgeoisie's more outspoken or less diplomatic representatives are expressing malicious joy over the collapse of the Internationale, the collapse of the illusions of socialism. Among socialists who are defending the fatherland there are also two shades, the extremists like the Germans W. Kolb and W. Hein, who admit the collapse of the Internationale, for which they blame the revolutionary illusions. These are out to restore a still more opportunist Internationale. In practice, however, they agree with the moderates, the cautious socialist defenders of the fatherland, such as Kautsky, Renaudel, and van der Vlodder, who stubbornly deny that the Internationale has collapsed, consider it merely suspended temporarily, and defend the Second Internationale's viability and right to exist. Revolutionary Social Democrats in the various countries recognize the collapse of the Second Internationale and the need to create a Third Internationale. To decide who is right, let us examine an historic document which bears upon the present war, and carries the unanimous and official signatures of all socialist parties in the world. That document is the Bâle Manifesto of 1912. Noteworthy enough, no socialist would, in theory, dare deny the need for a concretely historical analysis of every war. Today, however, none but the left Social Democrats, who are but few in number, would be so bold as to publicly and definitely repudiate the Bâle Manifesto, or declare it erroneous, or analyze it carefully, comparing its decisions with the conduct of the socialists after the outbreak of the war. Why is that so? It is because the Bâle Manifesto ruthlessly exposes the wrong reasoning and conduct of the majority of official socialists. There is not a single word in this manifesto on either the defense of the fatherland or the difference between a war of aggression and a war of defense. Not a syllable on a subject the official SD leaders both in Germany and in the Quadruple Entente have been talking and vociferating about most. In a perfectly clear, precise, and definite manner, the Bâle Manifesto analyzes the concrete clashes of interests which led towards war in 1912 and brought about war in 1914. The manifesto says that these are clashes arising on the basis of capitalist imperialism, clashes between Austria and Russia for domination over the Balkans, clashes between Britain, France, and Germany over their policies of conquest in Asia Minor, the policies of all of them. Clashes between Austria and Italy over their attempt to draw Albania into their sphere of influence, subject her to their rule, and clashes between Britain and Germany because of their mutual antagonism, and further, because of Tsarism's attempts to grab Armenia, Constantinople, etc. It will be seen that this applies in full to the present war. The undisguised predatory, imperialist and reactionary character of this war, which is being waged for the enslavement of nations, is most clearly recognized in the manifesto, which draws the necessary conclusion that war cannot be justified on the slightest pretext of being in the least in the interests of the people, that war is prepared for the sake of the profits of capitalists and ambitions of dynasties, and that on the part of the workers it would be a crime to fire at one another. These propositions contain the fundamentals for an understanding of the radical distinction between two great historical periods. One was the period between 1789 and 1871, when, in most cases, wars in Europe were indubitably connected with the most important interests of the people, namely, a powerful bourgeois progressive movement for national liberation which involved millions of people, with the destruction of feudalism, absolutism, and foreign oppression. It was on this basis alone that there arose the concept of defense of the fatherland, defense of a bourgeois nation that is liberating itself from medievalism. Only in this sense did socialists recognize defense of the fatherland. Even today it must be recognized in this sense, for instance, the defense of Persia or China against Russia or Britain, of Turkey against Germany or Russia, of Albania against Austria and Italy, etc., the 1914–15 war, as clearly expressed in the Bâle Manifesto, pertains to an entirely different historical period and is of an entirely different character. This is a war among predators for division of the loot, for the enslavement of other countries. Victory for Russia, Britain, and France means the strangulation of Armenia, Asia Minor, etc. This is stated in the Bâle Manifesto. Germany's victory means the strangulation of Asia Minor, Serbia, Albania, etc. This is stated in the selfsame manifesto, and has been recognized by all socialists. All phrases about a war of defense or about the defense of the fatherland by the great powers, that is, the great predators, who are fighting for world domination, markets and spheres of influence, and the enslavement of nations, are false, meaningless and hypocritical. It is not surprising that socialists who are in favor of defending the fatherland are afraid to recall or to exactly quote the Bâle Manifesto, for it exposes their hypocrisy. The Bâle Manifesto proves that socialists who stand for the defense of the fatherland in the 1914–15 war are socialists only in word and chauvinists in deed. They are social chauvinists. Recognition of this war as connected with national liberation leads to one line of socialist tactics. Recognition of a war as imperialist, predatory and aggressive, leads to another line. The latter has been clearly defined in the Bâle Manifesto. The war, it says, will evoke an economic and political crisis, which, it continues, must be utilized to hasten the collapse of the rule of capital. These words recognize that social revolution is ripe, that it is possible, that it is approaching in connection with the war. The ruling classes are afraid of a proletarian revolution, says the manifesto, quoting the example of the Paris Commune and of 1905, that is, the examples of revolutions, strikes, and civil war. It is a lie for anybody to say that the socialists have not discussed, or have not decided the question of their attitude towards the war. The Bâle Manifesto has decided this question. It has mapped out the line of tactics, that of proletarian revolutionary action and civil war. It would be erroneous to think that the Bâle Manifesto is a piece of empty declamation, a bureaucratic phrase, a none too serious threat. Those whom the manifesto exposes are prepared to say such things. But that is not the truth. The Bâle Manifesto sums up the vast amount of propaganda and agitation material of the entire epoch of the Second Internationale, namely, the period between 1889 and 1914. This manifesto summarizes, without any exaggeration, millions upon millions of leaflets, press articles, books, and speeches by socialists of all lands. To declare this manifesto erroneous means declaring the entire Second Internationale erroneous, the work done in decades and decades by all social democratic parties. To brush aside the Bâle Manifesto means brushing aside the entire history of socialism. The Bâle Manifesto says nothing unusual or out of the ordinary. It provides only and exclusively that which enabled the socialists to lead the masses, recognition of peaceful work as preparation for a proletarian revolution. The Bâle Manifesto repeated what Gust said at the 1899 Congress, where he ridiculed socialists' ministerialism manifesting itself in the event of a war for markets, brigandages capitalists, en garde. Pages 175–76, or what Kautsky said in 1909, in his pamphlet Der Weg zur Macht, in which he spoke of the end of the peaceful epoch and the advent of an epoch of wars, revolutions, and the proletariat's struggle for power. The Bâle Manifesto incontestably proves the complete betrayal of socialism by those socialists who voted for war credits, joined governments, and recognized the defense of the fatherland in 1914–15. This betrayal is undeniable. It will be denied by hypocrites alone. The only question is, how is it to be explained? It would be unscientific, absurd and ridiculous to reduce the question to personalities, to refer to Kautsky, Gust, Plekhanov, and say, even such persons. That would be a wretched subterfuge. Any serious explanation calls, in the first place, for an economic analysis of the significance of present-day politics, then for an analysis of their fundamental ideas, and, finally, for a study of the historic trends within socialism. What is the economic implication of defense of the fatherland in the 1914-15 war? The answer to this question has been given in the Baal Manifesto. The war is being fought by all the great powers for the purpose of plunder, carving up the world, acquiring markets, and enslaving nations. To the bourgeoisie it brings higher profits, to a thin crust of the labor bureaucracy and aristocracy, and also to the petty bourgeoisie, the intelligentsia, etc., which travels with the working class movement. It promises morsels of those profits. The economic basis of social chauvinism, this term being more precise than the term social patriotism, as the latter embellishes the evil, and of opportunism is the same, namely, an alliance between an insignificant section at the top of the labor movement, and its own national bourgeoisie, directed against the masses of the proletariat, an alliance between the servants of the bourgeoisie and the bourgeoisie, directed against the class that is exploited by the bourgeoisie. Social chauvinism is a consummated opportunism. Social chauvinism and opportunism are the same in their political essence: class collaboration, repudiation of the proletarian dictatorship, rejection of revolutionary action, obeisance to bourgeois legality, non-confidence in the proletariat, and confidence in the bourgeoisie. The political ideas are identical, and so is the political content of their tactics. Social chauvinism is the direct continuation and consummation of Millerandism, Bernsteinism, and British liberal labour policies, their sum, their total, their highest achievement. Throughout the entire period between 1889 and 1914, two lines in socialism, the opportunist and the revolutionary, are to be seen. Today there are also two lines in socialism. Let us not follow the method of referring to persons, which is practiced by the bourgeois and opportunist liars, and let us take the trends to be seen in a number of countries. Let us take 10 European countries: Germany, Britain, Russia, Italy, Holland, Sweden, Bulgaria, Switzerland, Belgium and France. In the first 8 countries, the division into the opportunist and revolutionary trends coincides with the division into social chauvinists and revolutionary internationalists. The main nuclei of social chauvinism in the social and political sense are Sozialistische Monatschaft and Company in Germany, the Fabians and the Labour Party in Britain. The Independent Labour Party entered in a bloc with both, the influence of social chauvinism in the latter being considerably stronger than in the British Socialist Party, in which about 3/7 are internationalists, namely, 66 to 84, Nash Azaria and the Organizing Committee, as well as Nashtialo, in Russia, Bisalati's party in Italy, Troelstra's party in Holland, Branting and Company in Sweden, the Shiroki, 21, in Bulgaria, Grilich and his people 1, in Switzerland. It is from revolutionary social democrats in all these countries that a more or less sharp protest has emanated against social chauvinism. 2 countries out of the 10 are the exception, but even the internationalists are weak, but not absent. The facts are rather unknown. Vaillant has admitted having received letters from internationalists, which he did not publish, then non-existent. Social chauvinism is a consummated opportunism. That is beyond doubt. The alliance with the bourgeoisie used to be ideological and secret. It is now public and unseemly. Social chauvinism draws its strength from nowhere else but this alliance with the bourgeoisie and the general staffs. It is a falsehood for anybody, including Kautsky, to say that the masses of proletarians have turned towards chauvinism. Nowhere have the masses been asked, with the exception, perhaps, of Italy, where a discussion went on for 9 months prior to the declaration of war, and where the masses also were against the Bisalati party. The masses were dumbfounded, panic-stricken, disunited, and crushed by the state of martial law. The free vote was a privilege of the leaders alone, and they voted for the bourgeoisie and against the proletariat. It is ridiculous and monstrous to consider opportunism an inner-party phenomenon. All Marxists in Germany, France, and other countries have always stated and insisted that opportunism is a manifestation of the bourgeoisie's influence over the proletariat, that it is a bourgeois labor policy, an alliance between an insignificant section of near-proletarian elements and the bourgeoisie. Having for decades to mature in conditions of peaceful capitalism, opportunism was so mature by 1914-15 that it proved an open ally of the bourgeoisie. Unity with opportunism means unity between the proletariat and its national bourgeoisie, that is, submission to the latter, a split in the international revolutionary working class. We do not say that an immediate split with the opportunists in all countries is desirable, or even possible at present. We do say that such a split has come to a head, that it has become inevitable, is progressive in nature, and necessary to the revolutionary struggle of the proletariat, and that history, having turned away from peaceful capitalism towards imperialism, has thereby turned towards such a split. Volentem ducant fata, nolentem trahant. 2. Since the onset of the war, the bourgeoisie of all countries, the belligerents in the first place, have united in lauding socialists who recognized the defense of the fatherland, that is, the defense of the bourgeoisie's predatory interests in the imperialist war against the proletariat. See how this basic interest of the international bourgeoisie is making its way into the socialist parties, into the working class movement, to find expression there. The example of Germany is particularly instructive in this respect, since the epoch of the Second Internationale saw the growth of the greatest party in that country, but the very same thing is to be seen in other countries, with only minor variations in form, aspect and outward appearance. In its issue of April 1915, Marxists Internet, a conservative German journal, published an article by a Social Democrat, a member of the Social Democratic Party, who concealed his identity behind the pseudonym of Monitor. This opportunist blurted out the truth regarding the substance of the policy pursued by the entire world bourgeoisie towards the working class movement of the 20th century. The latter can neither be brushed aside nor suppressed by brute force, he says. It must be demoralized from within, by buying its top section. It was exactly in this manner that the Anglo-French bourgeoisie has been acting for decades, by buying up the trade union leaders, the Millerands, the Briands and Company. It is in this manner that the German bourgeoisie is now acting. The Social Democratic Party's behavior, Monitor says to, and in essence in the name of, the bourgeoisie, is irreproachable in the present war, that is, it is irreproachably serving the bourgeoisie against the proletariat. The process of the transformation of the Social Democratic Party into a National Liberal Labour Party is proceeding excellently. It would, however, be dangerous to the bourgeoisie, Monitor adds, if the party were to turn to the right. It must retain the character of a workers' party with socialist ideals. On the day it gives that up, a new party will arise to take up the rejected program, giving it a still more radical formulation. Marxists Internet, 1915, number 4, pages 50-51. These words openly express that which the bourgeoisie has always and everywhere done covertly. Radical words are needed for the masses to believe in. The opportunists are prepared to reiterate them hypocritically. Such parties as the Social Democratic parties of the Second Internationale used to be are useful and necessary to the opportunists because they engendered the socialists' defense of the bourgeoisie during the 1914-15 crisis. Exactly the same kind of policy as that of the German Monitor is being pursued by the Fabians and the liberal trade union leaders in Britain, and the opportunists and the Jourisists in France. Monitor is an outspoken and cynical opportunist. Then there is another shade, a clever or honest opportunist. Engels was right when he once said that the honest opportunists are the most dangerous to the working class movement. Kautsky is an example of such an opportunist. In Die News Ethno. 9, of November 26, 1915, he wrote that the majority of the official party was violating its program. Kautsky himself upheld the policy of the majority for a whole year after the outbreak of the war, justifying the defense of the fatherland lie. Opposition to the majority is growing, he said. P. 272. Die Opposition gegen die Mehrheiten wuchsen ist, the masses are in opposition, opposition L. Nach dem Krieg, nur nach dem Krieg? Dort wurden die Klassen Gegensatz sich so verschärfen, dass der Radikalismus in den Massen die Oberhand gewinnt. p. 272. Es droht uns nach dem Krieg, nur nach dem Krieg? Dort die Flucht der radikalen Elemente aus der Partei und der Strom zu einer Richtung antiparlamentarischer? Soll heißen, außer parlamentarischer, Massenaction. So zerfällt unsere Partei in zwei Extreme, die nichts Gemeinsames haben. 3. Kautsky wants to represent the golden mean, and to reconcile the two extremes which have nothing in common. Today, 16 months after the outbreak of war, he admits that the masses are revolutionary. Condemning in the same breath revolutionary action, which he calls Abentur in Denstrassen, 4, p. 272, Kautsky wants to reconcile the revolutionary masses with the opportunist leaders, who have nothing in common with them, but on what basis? On the basis of mere words. On the basis of left-wing words of the left-wing minority in the Reichstag. Let the minority, like Kautsky, condemn revolutionary action, calling it adventurism, but it must feed the masses with left-wing words. Then there will be peace in the party, unity with the Sudikoms, Legines, Davids, and Monitors. But that is Monitor's self-same program in its entirety, a program of the bourgeoisie, only expressed in dulcet tones and in honeyed phrases. The same program was carried out by Worm as well, when at the session of the Social Democratic Group in the Reichstag, March 18, 1915, die Fraktion warnte, den Bürgern zu überspannen, in den Arbeitermassen wuchs die Opposition gegen die Fraktionstaktik, es galt, beim Marxistischen Zentrum zu verharren, Klassenkampf gegen den Krieg. Materials im Vorliebpunkt. ALS Manuscript gedruckt, S. 67. 5. Let us note the acknowledgement, on behalf of the Marxist Center, including Kautsky, that the masses were in a revolutionary temper. This was March 18, 1915. 8.5 months later, on November 26, 1915, Kautsky again proposed that the revolutionary masses be appeased with left phrases. Kautsky's opportunism differs from Monitor's only in the wording, in shades, and the methods of achieving the same end, preservation of the opportunists' influence, that is, the bourgeoisie's, over the masses, preservation of the proletariat's submission to the opportunists, that is, the bourgeoisie. Panicoek and Gorda have very properly dubbed Kautsky's stand passive radicalism. It is verbiage, to quote the French who have had occasion to make a thorough study of this variety of revolutionism, from their homemade models. I would rather prefer to call it covert, timid, saccharine and hypocritical opportunism. In substance, the two trends in social democracy now disagree, not in words or in phrases. When it comes to the art of blending defense of the fatherland, that is, defense of bourgeois plundering, with phrases on socialism, internationalism, freedom for the peoples, etc., Vandervelde, Renaudel, Sambat, Hindman, Henderson, and Lloyd George are in no wise inferior to Legion, Sudicum, Kautsky, or Hayes. The actual difference begins with a complete rejection of defense of the fatherland in the present war, and with acceptance of revolutionary action in connection with the war, during and after it. In this question, the only serious and businesslike one, Kautsky is at one with Kolb and Hein. Compare the Fabians in Britain and the Kautskyites in Germany. The former are almost liberals, who have never recognized Marxism. Engels wrote of the Fabians on January 18, 1893, 6, a gang of place hunters, shrewd enough to understand the inevitability of the social revolution, but totally unwilling to entrust this gigantic work to the immature proletariat alone. Their fundamental principle is fear of revolution. And on November 11, 1893, he wrote, haughty bourgeois, benevolently descending to the proletariat to liberate it from above, if only it is willing to understand that such a raw, uneducated mass cannot liberate itself, and can attain nothing without the charity of those clever attorneys, literators, and sentimental females. 22. How far from these the Kautskyites seem to be in their theory. In practice, however, in their attitude towards the war, they are quite identical. This is convincing proof of how the Marxism of the Kautskyites has withered, turned into a dead letter, a piece of cant. The following instances will reveal the kind of obvious sophisms used by the Kautskyites since the outbreak of war, to refute the tactics of revolutionary proletarian action, as unanimously adopted by the socialists in Basel. Kautsky advanced his theory of ultra-imperialism. By this he meant the substitution of joint exploitation of the world by internationally united finance capital, for the struggle of capital of some nations against that of other countries. Die Newsite No. 5, April 30, 1915, p. 144. At the same time, Kautsky himself added, "Can such a new phase of capitalism be at all achieved?" Sufficient premises are still lacking to enable us to answer this question. On the ground that a new phase is conceivable, though he himself lacks the courage even to declare it achievable, he now rejects the revolutionary tasks of the proletariat at a time when the phase of crisis and war has obviously arrived. Revolutionary action is rejected by the selfsame leader of the Second Internationale who, in 1909, wrote a book entitled Der Wegzermacht. Translated into almost all the principal European languages, the book revealed the connection between the impending war and the revolution, and proved that revolution cannot be premature. In 1909, Kautsky proved that the epoch of peaceful capitalism had passed, and that the epoch of wars and revolutions was at hand. In 1912, the Basel Manifesto made this view the basis of the entire tactic of the world socialist parties. In 1914 war came, followed by the economic and political crisis foreseen at Stuttgart and Basel. At this juncture Kautsky invented theoretical subterfuges to be used against revolutionary tactics. Axelrod has advanced the same ideas, only clothed in a phraseology a little more to the left. He writes in Free Switzerland, and it is his desire to exert an influence on Russian revolutionary workers. In his pamphlet, Die Krise und die Aufgaben der internationalen Sozialdemokratie, Zurich, 1915, we find a discovery that is so pleasing to the opportunists and the bourgeois of the whole world, namely, that das Internationalisierungsproblem der Arbeiterbewegung ist mit der Frage der Revolutionisierung unserer Kampfformen und Methoden nicht identisch, p. 37, and that der Schwerpunkt des Internationalisierungsproblems der Proletarischen Befreiungsbewegung liegt in der weiteren Entwicklung und Internationalisierung eben Generaltagspraxis, p. 40. Beispielsweise müssen die Arbeiterschutz- und Versicherungsgesetzgebung zum Objekt der Arbeiter, internationalen Action und Organisation werden, p. 39. 7. It goes without saying that such internationalism has the full approval, not only of the Sudekums, Legines and Hindmans, together with the Vanderveldes, but also of the Lloyd Georges, Normans and Brians. Axelrod defends Kautsky's internationalism without even quoting or analyzing any of the latter's arguments for defense of the fatherland. Like the Francophile social chauvinists, Axelrod is even afraid to mention that it is revolutionary tactics that the Basel Manifesto speaks of. Against the future, the uncertain and unknown future, Axelrod is prepared to advance the most left-wing and blatantly revolutionary phrases, such as saying that the future international will meet, Ingegentretten word, den Regierungen Fall der Kriegsgefahr, mit der Entfachung eines revolutionären Sturms. Inleitung der sozialistischen Revolution, p. 14. 8. No joking here. When, however, it is a matter of applying revolutionary tactics right now, during the present crisis, Axelrod says ganz Kautsky 9, Revolutionär Massenaction such tactics hat nach kein Jewish Berechtigung, wenn wir unmittelbar am Vorabend der sozialen Revolution standen, ähnlich wie es etwa in Russland seit den Studentendemonstrationen des Jahres 1901 Full War, die das Herreneinentschiedende Kampfgegen den Absolutismus ankündigten, 10, pages 40-41, and then he fulminates against the utopian, Opportunismus, quite in the spirit of Kolb, Heine, Sudicum, and Legion. The example of Russia exposes Axelrod most strikingly. 4 years elapsed between 1901 and 1905, and nobody could guarantee, in 1901, that the revolution in Russia, the first revolution against absolutism, would take place 4 years later. Prior to the social revolution, Europe is in exactly the same situation. Nobody can tell whether the first revolution of this kind will come about in 4 years. That a revolutionary situation, however, actually exists is a fact that was predicted in 1912 and became a reality in 1914. The 1914 demonstrations of workers and starving citizens in Russia and Germany also undoubtedly ankündigen das Herreneinentschiedende Kampf. 11. It is the bounden duty of socialists to support and develop such demonstrations and every kind of revolutionary mass action, economic and political strikes, unrest among the troops, right up to insurrection and civil war, furnish them with clear slogans, create an underground organization and publish underground literature, without which the masses cannot be called upon to rise up in revolution, help them get a clear understanding of the revolution, and organize for it. It is in this way that the Social Democrats acted in Russia in 1901, on the eve, am very bend, of the bourgeois revolution which began in 1905, but has not ended even in 1915. In the very same way, the Social Democrats are obliged to act in Europe in 1914-15 am very bend der sozialistischen Revolution. Revolutions are never born ready-made, they do not spring out of Jupiter's head. They do not kindle at once. They are always preceded by a process of unrest, crises, movements, revolts, the beginnings of revolution, the latter not always developing to the very end, if, for instance, the revolutionary class is not strong enough. Axelrod invents pretexts so as to distract Social Democrats from their duty of helping develop the revolutionary movements burgeoning within the existing revolutionary situation. Axelrod defends the tactics of David and the Fabians, while masking his own opportunism with left-wing phrases. Den Weltkrieg in ein Bürgerkrieg one den zu wollen where once inducen, 12, writes David, leader of the Opportunists, Die Sozialdemokratie im Weltkrieg, 13, Berlin, 1915, p. 172, in objecting to the manifesto of the Central Committee of our party, the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party, which was published on November 1, 1914. The manifesto advanced the Civil War slogan, adding, "We groß die Schwierigkeiten dieser Umwandlung zur Gegenseite sein mögen, die Sozialisten werden null die Verarbeiten in der bezeichneten Richtung systematisch, unbugsam, und energisch auszuführen, falls der Krieg zur Tatsache geworden ist." 14. Quoted by David, p. 171, it is noteworthy that a month before David's book appeared, May 1, 1915, our party published, in Sozialdemokrat No. 40, March 29, resolutions on the war, which advocate systematic steps towards turning the present imperialist war into a civil war, these steps being defined in the following way: 1. Refusal to vote for war credits, etc. 2. Rejection of Bergfrieden, 15. 3. Formation of an underground organization, 4. Support for fraternization by the men in the trenches, 5. Support for every kind of revolutionary mass action by the proletariat in general. O brave David! In 1912 he did not think it madness to refer to the example of the Paris Commune. In 1914, however, he was echoing the bourgeois cry of madness. Plekhanov, a typical representative of the social chauvinists of the Quadruple Entente, has given an appraisal of revolutionary tactics, which is fully in accord with David's. He has called the idea on 16. To wit, the Verabend 17, of the social revolution, from which a period of 4 years or more may elapse before the Incidentkampf. 18. These are, in fact, the first beginnings, weak as yet, but beginnings, nevertheless, of the proletarian revolution which the Bâle Resolution spoke of and which will never become strong suddenly, but will inevitably pass through the stages of relatively weak beginnings. Support for and the development, extension and intensification of revolutionary mass action and the revolutionary movement, the creation of an illegal organization for propaganda and agitation in this direction, so as to help the masses understand the movement and its tasks, methods and aims. These are the 2 points that any practical program of social democratic activity in the present war must inevitably boil down to. All the rest is opportunist and counter-revolutionary phrases, no matter what leftist, pseudo-Marxist and pacifist contortions those phrases may be disguised with. Whenever exclamations like the following are made in protest to us, all this in the usual fashion of the diehards in the Second Internationale, oh those Russian methods. Die Russische Taktik Cap. It David, 19, we reply merely by referring to the facts. On October 30, 1915, several hundred women, in Ichnundet, demonstrated in front of the Parteiverstand, and scented the following message through a deputation: Die Verbreitung von unzensierten Flugblättern und Druckschriften und Diabeltung nicht genehmigte Web dem großen Organisationsapparat hütelt mögliche alles Zerzeit des sozialistischen Gesetzes. Es fehlt nicht in Mitteln und Wegen, sondern einziglich in dem Willen. 20, my italics. Benötigt number 271. I suppose these Berlin women workers must have been led astray by the Bakuninist and adventurist, sectarian, see Kolbundgo, and reckless manifesto of the Russian Party's Central Committee, dated November 1,